Remind members that we are now in public session, and I would like to move to item number 4 on the agenda, the draft minutes. Can I refer to members to pages 28 to 34 of our meeting pack, and just to ask members, are they content that the draft minutes of the meeting on the 13th of March 2025 are a true reflection of proceedings? Yes, okay, thank you members. Just move on to item 5 on the agenda, matters arising. There are no matters arising that I have any. No? Okay, yes, thank you. Move on now to item number 6. Proposal for a directive as regards electrical vehicle supply equipment, compressed gas dispensers and electricity, gas and thermal energy meters. I'd just like to inform members that this item will be recorded by Hansard. And just now, I could refer members to the relevant pages on page 6 to 27 of our meeting pack. And just to remind members that as part of its consideration of the proposed act, the committee agreed to request an initial departmental assessment of impact and invite officials to give oral evidence. We're just on nice to the
Yeah, if I could just update members, the assessment of impact hasn't been received yet, but we have officials here who are going to brief. And if we could just pause to oh, there's Hansard now. We're grand.
you.
Just want to welcome them.
Good morning, and can I welcome Michael Bradley, Head of the Gas Team, the Department of Economy, and Damien Doherty, Chief Inspector of Trading Standard Services from the Department of Economy. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming along this morning. I suppose I'll open it to yourselves to give a briefing, and then if you're okay, then I'll open it to members for any questions. Is that okay?
Yes, well, I know that the impact assessment, I think the Minister has cleared it, but it's just working its way through the system, so I know you haven't received it yet, so apologies about that. But the impact assessment it'll be with you soon. Yes, I guess.
Sorry, Chair. Just sort of for clarification, the Minister signed it off. Okay. What other steps does it has to go before it gets to this committee?
I think it just has to be. I just got a phone call to say the Minister has signed it off, and then I think it just has to be emailed through the system. Really, I think I've literally just received that information, so I thought I should update you about that.
I'm assuming it's imminent. We should be receiving it shortly in our mailbox. And you're going to talk through?
Yes, I'm going to talk through basically what's in the impact assessment here. Yes, the proposal is it's a targeted technical amendment of the Measuring Instruments Directive, the MID, and in April 2016, the Measuring Instrument Regulations 2016 implemented the Directive 2014/32 EU into UK law. The scope and the associated essential requirements covered by the MID remained unchanged for more than 20 years. This means that the MID does not cover new measuring instruments, which need to be brought into scope, and there is a need for further harmonisation in standards. In view of this, and to avoid further fragmentation of the single market, a targeted technical amendment of the MID is considered necessary by the EU. So the proposed updates are the essential requirements defines the standards of instruments, the gas meters and conversion devices, updates technical requirements, active electricity meters, sets requirements for electrical meters, electric vehicle supply equipment, harmonises standards, and thermal energy meters set requirements, conformity, and brings air conditioning units into scope. So in terms of responsible departments, Department for Business and Trade, Office for Product Safety and Standards, Department for Infrastructure in Northern Ireland, Department for Economy, and the Northern Ireland Utility Regulator. This is a reserve matter, with the exception of electricity supply, transmission and distribution, which has devolved to NI, the Department for Economy. The Secretary of State for Business and Trade is responsible for enforcing the measuring instrument regulations in the UK, with some exceptions that are the responsibility of the Secretary of State for Transport. The Office for Product Safety and Standards, OPPS, part of DBT, leads on this for the UK. DFE has limited enforcement function on behalf of OPSS, on some metrology functions, but has no role in testing new instruments covered in this directive. The Department for Infrastructure has an interest, and the Department for Economy has an interest relating to energy matters, as the NI utility regulator is responsible for regulating utility meters in Northern Ireland. Trading Standards Service has some measuring instrument regulations enforcement responsibility. In terms of the energy input, it's quite limited. The Northern Ireland Utility Regulator has considered the directive as it relates to ongoing electricity and gas metering operations, and do not presently foresee that the Replacement EU Act would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities in Northern Ireland in a way that is liable to persist. The majority of this Act relates to other types of meters not related to energy, so Energy Group have not commented on those other types of meters. Metrology, Trading Standards Service has no metrology role in relation to this directive and is enabled to advise and suggest it would be a matter for the Office for Product Safety and Standards to assess and provide evidence to the committee. The Department for Infrastructure does not have a policy interest in the addition of electric vehicle supply equipment within the scope of the measuring instrument directives, and whilst they encourage the switch to electric vehicles, they do not own, operate, maintain or regulate the commercial charge point market. With regards to taximeters and exhaust gas analyzers, these are already covered by the existing directive, and so there are no impact. So they are not impacted by the new proposal to widen its scope. No explanatory UK government explanatory memorandum has been published to date. The department has asked for it, but we have not received it, and it will be provided to the committee as soon as it is received. So that no impact assessment has been published by the European Commission, as this is a technical and targeted amendment. As I said, DFE has requested the UK Government explanatory memorandum, but no further engagement has been undertaken. So, as I said, this is the impact assessment which will be with you as soon as possible. So, and then I think Damien has you sent through some questions that Damien's going to cover as well.
Just to note, members, we've just now received the assessment of impact, so it should land in your inbox in the next few seconds, and we're printing it now as well.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Damien then, yes?
Yeah. Obviously the committee has posed a number of questions that they want answered today. We'll do our best to answer the majority of them. We can't. First question was around regulatory alignment and divergence. It's been indicated guidance from the UK's Government Office of Product Safety and Standards states that the Measuring Instruments Regulations 2016 currently apply across the UK, but some of the provisions apply differently in Northern Ireland, so that they continue to implement NI Directive 2014-32 EU. The Product Regulation and Metrology UK PRM Bill is currently undergoing consideration in the House of Commons. The UK Government states that it will ensure that the Government can facilitate the continued smooth flow of goods between GB and Northern Ireland, and Clause 1 of the bill would empower the Secretary of State for Business and Trade to make regulations for products marketed in the UK which are designed for weighing and measuring, among other products. So the first question is, what provision of the Measuring Instruments Regulations 2016 currently apply differently in Northern Ireland? So effectively the differences have come about because of EU exit, because Northern Ireland has to align to EU regulations. So in 2019, the 2016 Measuring Instrument Regulations were amended by the Product Safety and Metrology etc. Amendment etc. EU Exit Regulations 2019, effectively to fix any deficiencies that would arise from the UK leaving the EU, such as references to EU institutions, and to make specific provision for the UK market, mainly changes to definitions, so things like a CE marking, notified body, European Economic Area, qualifying goods, conformity assessment bodies. Effectively, we have a Northern Ireland version of the Measuring Instruments Regulations, which sits almost comparable with the GB Measuring Instruments Regulations. Effectively, it Northern Irelandizes the regulations for make it operable by removing those references to the EU and institutions. So by and large, they're pretty identical, other than the fact that we have to have changes and minor changes to make sure that we can exist within the EU. So there's also then Product Safety and Metrology Amendment, etc. EU Exit Regulations 2019 were then amended by the Product Safety and Metrology, etc. Amendment to the extent and meaning of market EU Exit Regulations 2020 to apply to GB only and not to Northern Ireland. So essentially that was in support of implementing the Windsor Framework Northern Ireland Protocol as it was at the time. There are also other differences in that Schedule 1 to the Product Safety and Metrology, etc. Amendment, etc. UK NI indication, EU exit regulations allowed for the marking for UK NI. Again, this is a requirement to ensure that goods could be properly marked and indicated for assessment of conformity for Northern Ireland. Part 6 and Schedule 6 of the Measuring Instruments regulations are also different in Northern Ireland. Again, this is purely on a technical basis on putting instruments into use for trade. In GB, the regulations that back in 2006 contain provisions for putting instruments into use for trade. Those regulations were repealed. In Northern Ireland, we had our own 2,000 individual regulations for each piece of weighing and measuring equipment. Those regulations still are in force, so effectively we have the provisions for use for trade replicated on our own statutory instruments from 2007, and they had to be replaced in the 2016 regulations for GB. So effectively everything's the same, it's just we don't have Part 6 and Schedule 6 of Measuring Instruments regulations in Northern Ireland. The next question was, if this proposal were applied in Northern Ireland, what would be its likely effect on any current GB NI regulatory divergence or alignment? Unfortunately, the Department's unable to answer this question. The lead at the Department for Business and Trade on this matter would be best placed to answer this question. The next question is, what impact is that likely to have on industry and or consumers in Northern Ireland? Again, unfortunately, the Department is unable to answer this question. The lead at the Department for Business and Trade would be better placed to answer. Most of these questions are unknowns. The committee will probably need to seek the views of the Department for Business and Trade, who have the subject matter expertise in this highly technical and scientific area. Again, how does this compare with the likely impact if it is not applied? Again, the Department is unable to answer that question. Has the UK Government indicated how it expects the UK Product Regulation Metrology Bill, if passed, to interact with this proposed directive? Again, the Department's answer to that is no. DFE officials have no knowledge of the UK Government's intent on this bill and how it will interact with the proposed directive. Impact for GB NI movements of products. The OPSS guidance states measuring instruments that can be placed on the market in NI can be sold in the rest of the UK without additional approvals. However, some provision of the 2016 regulations apply differently to products being placed on the market in GB alone. Would application of the proposed directive have any impact on GB businesses who wish to export products to Northern Ireland? Again, this question would need to be answered by the lead officials on the Product Regulation and Market Bill at DBT. Engagement with the UK. Has the UK Government highlighted any risks or problems that might arise if the proposed directive is applied in Northern Ireland? If so, what mitigations has it proposed? The Department for the Economy has requested the UK Government explanatory memorandum, but no further engagement has taken place. Again, any further details would need to be provided by lead officials at the Department for the Economy. Has the UK Government highlighted any likely benefits if the proposed directive is applied in Northern Ireland? And if so, what is your assessment of those benefits? Again, this is a question that would need to be answered by the lead officials at the Department for Business and Trade, as this is a reserved matter. Stakeholder engagement. Can you provide details of any A, engagement that has taken place in the proposed directive, and B, potentially impacted stakeholders? No impact assessment has been published, as is a technical and targeted amendment, and again, further details can be requested from the lead officials at DBT. The Department's aware that the EU launched a call for evidence with the aim of collecting information on technical issues and expected economic impacts. Responses were received from a wide range of stakeholders, and the overwhelming majority of feedback supported the EU's decision to review and amend the current directive. The EU Commission has hosted workshops and evaluation study of the Non-Automatic Weighing Instruments and Measuring Instruments Directive in November 2024, and we believe they met with UK representatives as well. And if engagement has taken place, what potential benefits, risks or costs to businesses and or consumers have been highlighted? And again, that was a question that would need to be directed to officials at the Department for Business and Trade. Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Michael, and thank you, Damien. And just to note, obviously, the continuous reference from yourselves in relation to having to consult with the lead officials from the Department of Business and Trade. So I think it's quite pertinent as members of the committee that we maybe seek agreement to field those series of questions, Damien, that you had highlighted, to the Department for Business and Trade, if members would be in agreement.
Right.
Yes, okay. Okay, thank you. Are you okay now just to stay on? I'm going to just open it to the floor now if any members have questions. So yes, I have David.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make clear this is not directed necessarily to yourselves, but as an ongoing frustration. I'm disappointed, I have to say, with, whilst I understand and it's right that we forward these questions, I'm disappointed with the lack of constructive engagement around this. I think that we previously had met with the previous economy minister, and I thought we'd got to a reasonable place and had a good discussion that would lead to the department coming forward at least with its view on what it thinks may be happening, and we'd made all the necessary caveats that we understand that it doesn't always sit with the local departments, but in some ways they're the gatekeepers to some of those relationships. I would be flabbergasted and very disturbed if the department has not had engagement with Whitehall and the relevant departments in Whitehall around this or any other significant issue around this, that wouldn't have some insight into what those departments are thinking. And whilst I understand when officials come here, they can be reticent to speak to that. I think the discussion that we had with the minister said that we understand that they're not responsible for that, but we would welcome some insight into what may be coming or what insight officials are able to give us in that regard. So it's really at the department, not at yourselves, because this is a consistent. But if, to use my colleague's favourite phrase, it'd be worrying if the department has been incurious about some of this stuff and has not been engaging. And if it has been engaging, I think that officials should be given permission to come here and give some insight that they can into that. It's right that we engage with Whitehall, but I also think it's not just been the Department for Economy. We've had it with DERA and so on as well. But it feels that there's also been a change around ministers, and I'm just wondering whether it's ministerial or whether other officials have taken the opportunity to have a reset in the thinking around this. I would be slightly concerned, but we as a committee, I think, have all across parties said before, we expect departments to come here and give us what information they can, while understanding that some of it they are not responsible for. So I would just express that view. Most of the questions I would have had you have addressed, and thank you for that. Not necessarily with satisfactory answers, as you've heard, but that's another question. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, David. And just to note, Owen Tennyson has now joined us online.
Hi, Owen.
Can you hear us okay, Owen? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And just Steve?
Yeah, no, just to echo what the Deputy Chair said. Look, our job here is we're supposed to be doing scrutiny. I can't do any scrutiny because I have absolutely no information. I am no further forward than I was before I had. And having read the impact assessment that was being held up by the Minister for whatever particular reason, bearing in mind he's known when the committee is going to be and when the time is going to be, and it doesn't actually say anything. I'm very disappointed, Chair. We can't make any sort of decision or view on this because we have no information.
Yes, Peter?
Just similar to my colleagues, it's a government department, but I think I heard at least 4 times that the department is unable to answer that question. Again, with respect to the officials, it's not about you guys in particular. It's thematic on this committee, and I understand that there's a lead department in Westminster, but as the colleague to my left just said there, it makes it our job of scrutiny and making judgment on these things very, very difficult. So, Chair.
Okay. So concerns obviously have been noted by members, and I suppose just at this stage now, I would like to, if members have no other further questions, I'd just like to thank Damien and Michael for coming in this morning. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
I suppose it is worthy to note, obviously, this act is in the very early stages as well, and there is time to get the information that is required. I suppose the only decision that we as members need to make today is whether or not we wish to monitor the progress of the proposed replacement act as it progresses through the EU legislative system. Yes.
Could I make a
David?
proposal, perhaps, because it'll, I mean, of similar concerns that would arise, I'm not going to repeat them each time it arises in future. Could we perhaps write to the department and to the minister, asking whether the new minister's understanding is similar to that of the previous minister, and whether they will allow officials to come and speak to elements that perhaps fall within the remit of Whitehall, but with which their officials will have more direct engagement than we will have had, because that was certainly my understanding of the meeting that we had with Minister Murphy when he was here. He was quite open to that, so long as we done so on the understanding that his officials are not responsible for that information. So if we could just write emphasising that we felt that we had a good understanding with the department, and those issues have been resolved and they appear to be manifesting themselves once again.
Thank you, David. Well, if members are in agreement, then I think we can write just to confirm that what was originally
Yes.
agreed is still in, that's the position from the department and officials. So
Yeah.
content to do that. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll just move on now to the next item, and it's item number 7. Okay. Just remind.
We need a decision
Need to go
tomorrow.
back to
Decision.
members
Oh,
consent
sorry.
to monitor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or I'll
our
propose that we continue to monitor.
continue to monitor.
Second that.
Second. Okay. Thank you, members.
So, sorry. You're on the wrong.
Just a moment, members.
Yeah. So, decisions taken to monitor.
Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so thank you, members. The department provides a revised assessment of the impact of any changes are proposed by the Council of the EU or European Parliament, which would have a significant impact specific to everyday life of communities here in a way that is liable to persist, and that RE is asked also to monitor the progress of the proposal and submit quarterly updates to the committee. Thank you. And just for members,
Chair, could we, John Buckley's just got in touch and asked if someone could send them the link to the meeting, if that's possible.
yes.
It's been requested from Broadcast now, so it should come
Okay,
through.
no problem.
Okay, thank you, David. And just obviously members should note that the committee can decide to hold an inquiry at any time in any proposed replacement act that it is monitoring. Okay. So just move on now to item number 7. Just to remind members, obviously, that the Easter recess is from the 12th of April, with Easter Sunday falling on the 20th of April. The committee has in the past worked on the principle that it only meets during periods of recess when there is a statutory business to be conducted and a statutory time frame applies. The committee has no statutory business to conduct next week, the 17th of April, so a committee meeting will not be scheduled. You may wish to propose that the committee does not schedule a meeting for Thursday, the 24th of April, which is the Easter week. So I'd just like to ask members, are they content that I write to the British Cabinet Office to request that notifications are not made to the committee on the 17th of April, as would normally be the case, meaning that there would be no need to meet during the Easter week? Is members content? Yeah, okay, thank you. So if members are now content, I was going to deal with items 8 to 15 on the agenda together. These are proposed EU acts that started their legislative passage through the committee before the committee was established. They haven't been notified to the committee, but there was agreement to start gathering evidence. Okay, so just to advise members that the relevant packs are at pages 38 to 1720 of your meeting packs. I'll just, Marie, do you want to go through each one?
Yes.
Item 8, yeah?
Yeah. So,
Page?
No, each item.
if you ask nicely. So item 8 is a proposed directive and item 9 is a proposed regulation. They make up a legislative package to revise and replace existing EU pharmaceutical legislation. So the assessments of impact from the Department of Health can be found at pages 326 and 792 of the pack. So the European Parliament has adopted its position on both of these proposals, but the Council of the EU has yet to finalise its position, and negotiations between the Council and the Parliament are expected to commence towards the end of the second quarter of this year. Therefore, publication isn't likely until the second half of the year. Item 10 is the proposed EU Act on detergents and surfactants.
Could I just come in there, Chair? This one on medicines is of particular interest, and I think we should be very aware of this one because it refers to both new medicines, but it also refers to generic medicines and the differences in them and how they're different. And this goes contrary to the view that sort of Northern Ireland medicines should be no different from GB medicines, because it does make a specific difference between new medicines, which will be under EU regulations, and generic medicines, which will be under UK GB regulations. So I think this is something we do need to keep a careful eye on as it goes through.
Okay.
Sure. Just on principle to put on record from our opposition that the EU should be providing oversight in this regard for Northern Ireland for human medicines. Just put that on record.
David, thank you.
Okay, so moving on then to item 10 I've already mentioned. The assessment of impact from DERA is at page 3 of the table papers. So trilogues are currently ongoing between the Parliament and the Council of the EU, but there isn't a clear indication of when that Act is likely to be published. Item 11 is for reform of the EU Customs Union. The assessment of impact from economy. It has been emailed to members and a copy was distributed this morning. The European Parliament has established a position, but the Council, it hasn't yet established its negotiating mandate. So trilogues for that, they aren't expected to commence until the second half of the year. So publication for that Act is still some way off. Item 12.
Or through the Chair, sorry, I apologise. Again, this is another one I think we're going to have to keep special interest in it because it does make changes into the red and green lanes. And it particularly refers to the waiver of €150 that currently exists, which is the Europeans are looking to do away with, which would mean that there would be a definitive customs charge internally within the United Kingdom. I think this is a significant issue and it's something we should be keeping a careful eye on.
There will be actions proposed at the end of this. This is just an overview of what we're looking at. So
it's important that we get it on the record.
Okay. 12 is a proposed EU regulation on plants obtained by new genomic techniques and their food and feed. So DERA's assessment of impact is at page 8 of the table papers, and an assessment of impact from the FSA is at page 1427 of the meeting pack. So both the EU Parliament and Council have established their negotiating positions on the proposal, and trilogues are expected to commence in early May. So, and then if agreement is reached between the institutions, it's possible that adopted Act could be published sort of late 25, early 26. The next one is item 13. It's on the circularity
Sorry,
requirement.
Marie, 2 seconds. Peter, did you want to?
Yeah, Chair, I just wanted to clarify. Can we speak briefly in this as the clerk reads this out? Is that okay? I just wanted to check on that proposal for regs on plants, genomic tests. Is that effectively the genomic techniques? Can I clarify? Is that gene editing of plants?
I don't know. Is the answer. So.
Okay, well, again, sort of that's quite a significant one, which I think we'd want to keep a close eye on, just in terms of how that impacts on a range of DERA-related issues in Northern Ireland. So, yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Through the Chair, I think the House of Lords is also raising an interest in this one in particular because of the potential with gene editing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. So we'll move back then to item 13. The assessment from Department for Infrastructure is at page 1532, and an assessment from DERA is at 210 of the table papers. So the European Parliament is expected to establish its position in May or June, but the Council hasn't established its position yet. So again, publication of that Act is likely to be some way off. Item 14 is a proposed reg on the protection of animals during transport. DERA's assessment is at page 216 of the table pack. So neither the Parliament nor the Council has established their position on this proposal. Therefore, that's not likely to be published anytime soon. Finally, item
Just
15.
again, through the chair, this one will be of particular interest because I think we've already been approached by the Ulster Farmers Union and other people in the agribusiness sector have got grave concerns about this one as well.
So item 15 on the agenda is a proposed regulation on the safety of toys. So trilogues on the proposal are ongoing, with a third and possibly final one scheduled for today. So publication of this particular one could be in the next month or two. So I'll just hand over to the chairperson at this stage.
Okay, thank you. And just to note that Jonathan Buckley, MLA, has joined us. Jonathan, can you hear okay? Thank you. So just then to remind members, at the meeting on the 13th of March, the committee noted a response from the TEO that advised that departments are unable to provide information on this proposal. They stated that in Britain, product safety is the responsibility of the Office for Product Safety and Standards, which sits under the British Department for Business and Trade, and there is no direct counterpart of the office here. Therefore, the committee wrote to local councils, if you can recall, the British Government and the Consumer Council to seek their views on the likely impact of the proposed act. So can I advise members that a response from the Consumer Council is at page 1718 of your meeting pack, and a response from the chair of Solace NI, the Society of Local Authority Chief Executives, is at page 224 of your tabled papers. So Solace NI states that while the proposal presents challenges for the toy industry, it will greatly enhance consumer protection and toy safety. The Consumer Council states that it does not have any statutory remit in relation to product safety, nor does it have any consumer data or research on this topic. It advises, after having engaged with the Office of Products of Standards and Safety, that queries on reserved matters such as product safety should be directed to the Windsor Framework Task Force, which will consult with the Office of Products Safety and other relevant departments to gather information on the impact of the proposals. A response from the British Government is expected today and will be considered when we meet again on the 1st of May. Okay. Yes, David?
Chair, I think it's again dissatisfied with the Department for Economy's approach in this and unwillingness, in my opinion, to engage constructively. But on a more general terms, I think if there doesn't seem to be a direct counterpart here that's, or anybody that's willing to take responsibility for these kind of areas, and yet it's being regulated on, I do think it's something that perhaps we should write to the executive and point out and ask the executive to that we're going to need in these areas someone locally to engage with, and they may well want to give consideration to who should undertake that in future. Because I think it's not acceptable where we're dealing with some of these issues that there's no one out there locally to talk to, and even those that would have some kind of understanding seem hesitant to engage with us. So I think we need to write to the executive and ask them that this is an executive problem that they need to resolve.
Yeah, Chair, happy to second David's proposal, and equally, I understand how officials who come here who, they're sort of saying to us, look, this is a Whitehall or a Westminster, it's DEFRA or whatever it might be. But equally, we do have specialists in all departments. It's not like this stuff is really outlying. This stuff all applies in Northern Ireland as well, even if the policy or legislative intent is held at Westminster. So, I just feel we need to get at least opinions, and I know how officials will be, reticent to give those, but ministers can clear those with officials should they wish to. A minister can allow officials to come and give opinions, and I think that helps us in the job that we have to do to try and make judgments around a lot of these quite complicated issues, to be quite honest.
Yes, Steve?
Yeah, just a quick one. I noticed the Northern Ireland Consumer Councils, and when they say it's fully committed to working with Northern Ireland Assembly committees to ensure Northern Ireland consumers are represented in health safety, and then promptly says it's got no real interest in it.
Yes.
I'm finding real difficulty with this because there must be somebody who's responsible in Northern Ireland for sort of safety of toys. Because I can imagine if there was an issue with the safety of toy, it would be dealt with. Consumer Council, all can do is read their letter, but to me that everybody seems to be spending an awful lot of time saying it's got nothing to do with me.
There's some, I'm not necessarily saying the Consumer Council, some organisations I found that throughout the process of Brexit and everything else had lots to say, and now that some of them have got their wish in some regards, and now that we're dealing with issues around it, they don't want to touch it, don't want to engage with it, don't want to be any responsibility of theirs. I think it's just not satisfactory.
Okay, so obviously the proposal, I think it's kind of been agreed by everyone that we will write to the department to see what options are available in relation to getting expert advice in relation to product safety and standards.
And check to the executive, because I think this is a good example. This is a good example, but it's not the only example. This is an executive problem that keeps reoccurring. They need to decide who these things fall within the remit of, because there has to be some kind of local input to this.
Yes. And then given the proposal has been at a later stage in the EU legislative process, it is proposed that a representative from Solace NI is invited to attend our next meeting on the 1st of May to give evidence on the proposal, and that legal advice is requested, and a legal advisor is invited as well to attend the meeting. Yep. Are members content with this approach?
Content.
Okay, yes, thank you. And then for the remainder of the proposals, it is proposed that departmental evidence sessions are scheduled, legal advice is requested, and briefings with the legal advisor are scheduled. So based on an Act's progress within the EU legislative system, the following dates are proposed. However, members should note that the dates could change depending on whether a committee has statutory business to conduct. So it is proposed that the 1st of May 2025 it would be detergents and surfactants,
Washing up liquid.
along with safety of toys as already agreed. Okay, yes. On the 8th of May, it would be the new genomic techniques.
Yep.
On the 15th of May, medicinal products for human use. Authorisation and supervision of medicinal products for human use and the EU Customs Code reform. And then on the 22nd of May, it would be for the end-of-life vehicles and protection of animals during transport. Are members content with this approach as outlined? Yes, content. Are members content that the assessments of impact and relevant submissions considered today are published on the committee's webpage?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, yes, thank you. So just for members now moving on to item 16, the proposal for a regulation as regards the strengthening of the position of farmers in the food supply. And can I refer members to the relevant papers at pages 1721 to 1760 of your meeting pack.
Give us a wee second there, Chair.
Yeah,
Bring it
certainly.
up. Yeah.
Okay. Just remind members that at its meeting on the 20th of February, the committee agreed to monitor this proposed replacement EU Act and requested a revised assessment of impact from DERA in any changes, if any changes are proposed by the Council of the EU or the European Parliament, which would have a significant impact here. The DSC also asked DARA to provide a summary of responses from relevant stakeholders to the European Commission's public consultation on the proposal. So at pages 1749 to 1760 of your meeting pack is an updated assessment of impact provided by the Department, which includes a summary of responses to the Commission's consultation and the British Government's explanatory memorandum, which we did note back on the 13th of March. So currently the proposed Act is in the very early stages of the EU legislative process, and as it progresses further, updates will be received from RAISE and the Department if significant changes are proposed. Are members content to note at this stage?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Thank you, members. Just move on now to item number 17, correspondence. And can I refer members to item 17.1, and that's at pages 1762 to 1771 of your meeting pack, is the explanatory memorandum from the British Government on the European Commission's 2025 work programme. Are members content to note? Yeah. Okay. Moving on now to item 17.2, and that's at pages 1772 to 75 of the meeting pack. And it's a response from the Cabinet Office to the committee's request for updates on 3 EU laws identified by the Executive Office as new EU acts that might be notified to the Assembly. Are members content to note the response? Yep. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Moving on now to item 17.3, and that's at pages 1776 to 78 of the meeting pack. And it's a copy of correspondence from the NI Affairs Committee to the Secretary of State regarding its recent oral evidence session on the operation of the Windsor framework. Are members content to note? Okay, yes. Thank you. I'm just moving on now swiftly to item 17.4 at pages 1779 to 1806 of your meeting pack, and it's a copy of correspondence from the NI Affairs Committee to Lord Murphy regarding its inquiry into the operation of the Windsor framework. It also includes a transcript of the oral evidence provided by the NI Audit Committee. Are members content to note? Yes? Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, members, we'll just move on now to Chairperson's business, item number 18. And can I refer members to pages 1807 to 1808 of your meeting pack? Okay, I'll give you a few minutes. It's just to remind members that on the 20th of March, members of the committee met informally with Lord Murphy, who is conducting the independent review of the Windsor framework. So a note of that meeting is included at pages 1808 of the pack for members' information. Okay, all right, thank you. So just moving on to item.
Yep, Jonathan.
Yes, Jonathan.
Yeah, no, just to note on that, and apologies that I couldn't attend that event, but I really do appreciate the note and the way it was structured, because it certainly breaks it down very, very clear on some of the issues that have been included. So thanks for that. I think that probably goes out to Marie.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just moving on then to item 19. Any other business? Yes, Steve?
Sorry, Carol. Sorry, apologies, Chair, for not bringing it up earlier. The briefings we got on some of the pending legislation and directives that are coming through at the moment, I noticed when we're going to Brussels, is there any way we could get updates when we're in Brussels on those specific pieces? Because that would probably inform our work rather than if we could be a bit more structured about it.
I suppose there's the option that we could notify the Executive Office in Brussels of the ones that we are actually looking at and see if they can maybe gather some evidence in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, I think
our visit. Sorry,
I think that would be useful. And the other one I think is, I don't know, I can't remember, but it was the question on the carbon trading issue, because I know there's a lot of discussion going on at the various moments in time about carbon trading issue and how the Windsor framework will be affected by that or not, as the case may be. So that might be an additional one to look into it. I mean, maybe it's something we might review back in May, so that they've got a month out, so they could look at some sort of specific briefings and some of the sort of legislative processes as well. Because there's a UK-EU summit in mid-May or something like that, and there'll be a few discussions after that about sort of various other pieces of legislation. So I just sort of, we could keep flexible on it, but I think I would like to see something a bit more structured when we're in Brussels, so actually identifying some of the key areas we're at, and if we're there, we might as well see what they're saying in the EU.
Yes.
well, we can see what we can do. The programme has sort of been agreed and things have been set in place. But if we can get something from the Executive Office out there, and that maybe be a platform then to gather further information. So if we can get them to gather as much information as possible.
To quote our Prime Minister, the world is changing every moment. Flexibility.
Okay, thank you. And just moving on now to item number 20, date and time and place of next meeting. So obviously the next meeting will be scheduled for the 1st of May, okay, at 10 a.m. in room 30. Okay, so thank you, members.
Thank you.
The meeting is now adjourned.
Committee Room 30, sound. Committee Room 30, sound.